You have been working for something that already belongs to you. I want you to hold still for that. Chosen one. Because it took me 52 years to be able to say it out loud. And I am going to hand it to you in the next half hour for free. Not because I'm generous. Because I'm old enough now to know exactly what those years cost. And I don't want you paying the same bill I paid. You have been working for something that already belongs to you. Praying for something that was already signed over to your name. Asking God, over and over, for a confirmation He gave you so long ago that you stopped recognizing His handwriting. And you keep going. That's the part that gets me. You keep going. Because you are the kind of person who does. Let me tell you what I mean, and let me be specific. Because vague talk never healed anybody. Every one of us has a sentence we've been finishing our whole lives. It starts the same way. I'll finally feel it when. And then you fill in the blank with whatever you're missing this year. I'll finally feel chosen when the door opens. I'll finally feel called when somebody confirms it out loud. I'll finally feel at peace when the debt clears. When the diagnosis turns. When my son picks up the phone. When the church I've been serving for 11 years finally puts my name on something. I'll finally know God is pleased with me when He blesses the thing I've been begging Him to bless. You've said one of those. Maybe you said it this morning, in the car, before you were awake enough to censor yourself. And here's what I need you to understand about that sentence. From a man who built an entire life on it, the blank never gets filled. It refills. You fill it in, you get the thing. And by the time your hand comes off the door, there is a new blank sitting there waiting for you. And your heart starts the sentence over. 52 years. That's how long I ran at a line that moved every time I got close to it. And the cruelest part, the part nobody warns you about, is that the running looks like faithfulness. From the outside, it looks like devotion. It looks like a man who serves, who gives, who shows up early and stays late and never complains. Nobody in my life ever looked at me and said, "That man is lost." They said, "That man is dependable." I was both. And only one of those was true underneath. I need to take you back, because you won't understand where I ended up, unless you know where I started. I grew up in a small church in a small town, the kind of building with a gravel lot and a furnace that groaned every winter like it was praying too. My father was the man who unlocked that building. 6 mornings a week, before the sun, he was there setting up chairs, cleaning the fellowship hall, fixing whatever broke, salting the steps when the ice came. He had a key to that church for 31 years. He never once stood behind the pulpit. Not once. He was never asked to say the offering prayer. When they printed the anniversary bulletin with the photographs of everyone who had served the congregation, my father was not in it. Not out of cruelty. Out of forgetfulness, which is worse, because cruelty at least remembers your name. I was maybe 12 when I noticed. I was standing in the doorway of that fellowship hall watching people walk past him, good people. Church people walk right past him with their coffee like he was part of the furniture. And something in my chest hardened into a decision. Not him. Not me. I will never be the man nobody sees. I made that vow at 12 years old, in a church, in front of God, and I want you to hear how spiritual it sounded and how rotten it was at the root. I didn't decide to serve. I decided to be seen. And for the next 5 decades, everything I did every hour, every dollar, every ministry I gave myself to, was that 12-year-old boy trying to make sure his father's life meant something, by making sure his own life was impossible to ignore. So I worked. Lord, did I work. I built a business from a truck and a phone. 60 hours a week, then 70. I was on boards. I was on the building committee. I was the one they called when the roof needed replacing and the money wasn't there. And I liked being that man. I gave until it hurt, and then I gave a little more, so I'd feel the ache. Because the ache felt like proof. And it worked. That's what nobody tells you either. Sometimes the wrong thing works. By 54, I had it. The house on the good side of town. My name on a plaque in a hallway I helped pay for. Men shaking my hand at the door on Sunday. A pastor who called me first. Everything that 12-year-old boy standing in the doorway had wanted, I had it in my hands. And I felt nothing. I need you to understand, I'm not being dramatic. I mean nothing. I remember sitting in my truck in that church parking lot after they dedicated the new wing, engine off, hands still on the wheel, and the only thought I could find was, is this it? 42 years of climbing, and the summit was a flat, quiet, empty room. There's a man in Scripture who knows exactly what that parking lot felt like, and he's not who you'd expect. Elijah had just come off the greatest day of his life. Mount Carmel. Fire from heaven in front of the whole nation. 450 prophets of Baal against one man of God. And God answered him in front of everybody. If ever a man had a receipt, it was that man on that day. That was his plaque. That was his dedication service. And what does the very next chapter show you? A man under a broom tree, in the wilderness, asking God to let him die. Read that again sometime. The miracle didn't hold him. The victory didn't hold him. The public confirmation, the one every one of us has been begging God for, burned itself out inside of 24 hours and left him lying in the dirt, saying he'd had enough. And here's where it gets real. God doesn't rebuke him. God feeds him, lets him sleep, feeds him again. And then, on a mountain, God does not come in the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire, the very fire that had validated him days earlier. He comes in a low, still voice. Do you see it? The thing Elijah was famous for was not the thing that could hold him. The fire proved something to the crowd. It couldn't say anything to the man. Only the quiet voice could do that. I chased fire for 52 years. I chased the visible, public, undeniable answer, because I thought that was how you know you matter to God. And every time I got it, I was under the broom tree by Tuesday. And I know I'm not the only one. A woman wrote me last spring from outside Toledo, 58 years old, 22 years teaching third grade. 4 of those years she'd been quietly begging God to tell her whether she was where He wanted her. She said she'd asked for a sign so many times, she'd started apologizing to Him for asking again. Then her school gave her a plaque at the end of the year. Teacher of the Decade. Something like that. Her whole family came. She said she smiled through the entire ceremony, drove home, put the plaque on the kitchen counter, and sat down in a dark house at 9 at night, feeling like somebody had hollowed her out with a spoon. She thought something was wrong with her. Nothing was wrong with her. She'd just found out, the hard way, that the thing she'd been asking God for could not do the job she needed done. A plaque cannot tell you that you're loved. It doesn't have that in it. It never did. Now let me tell you about my marriage, because this is the part of my story I'd rather skip, and the part you probably need most. My wife and I nearly ended it when I was 49. Not over money, not over anything you could put in a court document. We nearly ended it because I had turned providing into a substitute for presence, and I could not tell the difference between the two. I thought love was output. I thought if I kept the roof solid and the accounts full and the cars running and the vacations booked, that was love delivered. And I got angry, really. Honestly angry, when it wasn't received as love. I would think, does she not see what I'm carrying? She sat across the kitchen table from me one night, and said something I have carried for 30 years. She said, "You are the hardest working man I know. And I have been lonely in this house since our first child was born." Not one accusation in that sentence. Just the truth. Laid flat. I didn't understand it then. I understood it about 6 years later. And it came to me through a woman in the Gospels I had always quietly judged. Martha. Everybody has heard that story preached as a scolding. It isn't one. Look at what's actually happening in that house. Jesus of Nazareth is under her roof. And she is doing exactly what a good woman of her culture was raised to do. She is serving him. Cooking, carrying, arranging. That is not laziness. That is not rebellion. That is devotion, with a dish towel in its hand. And he tells her, gently, that she is troubled about many things, and that her sister has chosen the one thing that will not be taken away. Do you know what he's saying? He's saying, Martha, you are working for me in the same room where you could be with me. That was my whole life in one sentence. I was working for God in the same room where I could have been with him. I was providing for my wife in the same house where I could have been present with her. I was building my father a monument out of my own life instead of sitting down in the quiet where he actually lived. Serving is not the same as sitting. Provision is not the same as presence, and a man can spend 50 years mistaking one for the other and be applauded the whole way. Now I have to give you the passage that finally broke it open in me. Because everything I've told you so far is diagnosis, and diagnosis without the cure is just cruelty. You know the story of the prodigal son. Everybody does. But the story doesn't end with the younger boy. It ends with the older one. And I am convinced the older brother is the reason Jesus told it at all. While the party is going on, the older brother is out in the field. He's working. Of course he is. That's what he does. He comes in from the field, hears the music, finds out his brother is home and his father has killed the fattened calf, and he will not go in and listen to what he says to his father. It's one of the most honest speeches in all of Scripture. He says, "All these years I have served you. I never broke one of your commands. And you never gave me so much as a young goat, so I could celebrate with my friends." That's not a rebellious man. That's an exhausted one. That is a son who has been living like an employee on his own father's land. And the father answers him with the sentence I would give 10 years of my life to have understood at 25. "Son, you are ever with me, and all that I have is yours. All that I have. Not if you finish the harvest. Not once you've earned back what your brother wasted. Not when you've proven yourself for another decade. All that I have is already yours. And it has been yours the entire time you were out there in the field working for it." That older brother stood in the middle of his own inheritance and starved. He had access to that calf every single day. He could have called his friends any evening he wanted. There was no lock on anything. The only thing standing between him and the celebration was that he thought he had to earn what he had already been given. Chosen one. That was me. 52 years in the field, working for the estate I already owned, resentful and faithful at the same time, wondering why God never seemed to say "well done" loud enough for me to hear it. He'd been saying it. I had built a life too loud to hear it in. And if you want to know how far back it goes, look at the Jordan River. Jesus comes up out of that water and the heavens open and the Father says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Now stop and count." What had he done at that point? No miracles, no sermons, nothing walked on, nothing multiplied, nothing raised. The public ministry hadn't started. The Father declared his pleasure before the works, not because of them. If the Son of God did not have to earn the Father's pleasure with performance, what exactly do you think you're buying with yours? I want to say something directly to you now, because I've been talking about my life, and this isn't about my life. If something in you has been sitting up straighter for the last few minutes, if you recognized yourself in that field, if you know what it is to serve faithfully and feel unseen anyway, that recognition is not an accident, and it isn't emotion. That's the Spirit putting his finger on a specific place in you. My name is George. I'm the voice you've been listening to. And I'm not a man who figured this out early. I figured it out late, after I had already spent the currency I can never get back: my 30s, my 40s, my children's childhood. Everything I say to you, I say as a man cleaning up after himself out loud, so that somebody younger doesn't have to. And I'll tell you what changed the ending for me. It wasn't more effort. It was finally understanding what had been placed in me before I ever started running. The calling is wide. The instructions reach only a few. If there is a burning in your spirit right now, do not minimize it. That is the sign. The secret protocol delivers the 7 keys God reserved for those who are ready to unlock what was sealed inside them before birth. The full audiobook is included to absorb in depth, in your own time, in the presence of God. And the Awakening Map, the bonus guide that reveals the 5 stages of spiritual awakening and positions you with precision at the exact point of your journey today. Link pinned in the first comment. For a limited time, only because not every door stays open forever. Now let me tell you how it finally broke. My father passed at 81. Quietly, the way he did everything. After the funeral, I went back to that church, and I don't know why, except that I had his keys in my pocket and no reason to keep them. I ended up in the boiler room. It's a small concrete space under the sanctuary. 1 bulb, pipes overhead. And it smelled exactly the way it smelled when I was 12 years old. And there on the wall, in pencil, in my father's handwriting, was a column of dates. Hundreds of them. Years of them. Beside each date, a few words. Not a work log. I stood there long enough to read maybe 40 of them before my legs gave out on me. Nov 3 prayed for the Willis family. Boy came home. Feb 12 asked the Lord for patience with the trustees. He gave it. Aug 30 thanked him for a good roof and a warm house. Same as yesterday. 31 years of a man talking to God in a concrete room where nobody could see him do it. 31 years of a man who was never in the bulletin, never behind the pulpit, never thanked from the platform, and who was. I realized, standing there with my hand on that wall, the most peaceful human being I have ever known. I had spent my entire life trying to redeem my father from an obscurity he was never suffering in. He wasn't the man nobody saw. He was the man who had already been seen by the only one whose seeing mattered. And so he didn't need the bulletin. He didn't need the plaque. He had gone down into that basement every morning and sat with the father in the middle of the estate, while his son was up in the field, sweating, building a name, furious about a party he was always invited to. That's the day I stopped running. 64 years old, in a boiler room, with pencil dust on my fingers. Now I want to be careful here, because there are 2 ways to hear what I've just told you, and only one of them is right. I am not telling you to stop working. I am not telling you ambition is sin, or that God wants you small. That's not the lesson, and if you take that out of here, you'll trade one lie for another. Caleb was 85 years old when he walked up to Joshua and said, "Give me this mountain." 85. 45 years after God made him a promise, and he wanted the mountain with the giants on it, the hardest ground in the whole inheritance. That's not a small man. That is a man with fire still in him, at an age when most men are done. But read why he could ask. He says, "The Lord has kept me alive these 45 years, and my strength today is as it was then." He wasn't asking for the mountain to prove anything. He'd already spent 45 years in the wilderness knowing what he knew about himself and about God, watching an entire generation die around him for a report he refused to sign. Caleb went after the mountain from a settled place. I went after mine from an empty one. Same climb, completely different man doing the climbing, and the wisest man who ever lived wrote a whole book about the difference. Solomon had everything a human being can accumulate: building projects, gardens, silver, singers, houses, the whole catalog. He says so himself, item by item. And then he says he looked at all the works his hands had wrought, and it was vanity and chasing after wind. He wasn't saying the works were evil. He was saying you cannot fill a soul with output. You can pour your whole life into that hole, and the hole doesn't shrink. Because it was never a hole. It was a door. And it was only ever going to open from the inside. So what actually changes? Practically, tomorrow morning. Because I don't want you to feel something for 30 minutes, and then live exactly the same way. Here's what changed for me, and I'll give it to you plain. I stopped asking God to confirm what he'd already said, and started thanking him for what he'd already said. That's a small turn of the wheel that changes the whole direction of the ship. Every time I caught myself praying, "Lord, show me if I'm really called," I made myself stop and say instead, "Lord, you already told me. I'm sorry I keep asking you to repeat yourself." The second thing, I started measuring my days by presence instead of output. My wife and I are still married, 30 years past that kitchen table. And the reason is not that I got better at providing. It's that I started coming home at 6 and leaving the phone in the truck, and I sat in a room with the woman I married and did nothing productive whatsoever. That was the hardest discipline of my adult life. Doing nothing valuable with somebody I love felt like theft for about a year. Now I understand it was the only thing I ever built that's still standing. Third, and this one is for you specifically, chosen one, because I know how you're wired. I stopped treating the ache in my chest as evidence that something was missing. That ache, that restlessness, that feeling of not yet that has followed you since you were young, you've been reading it as a lack. It isn't. It's a deposit that hasn't been opened. It's the weight of something God put inside you, pressing outward. And every year you spend trying to fill it from the outside is a year that deposit sits there gathering nothing. The older brother's problem was never that his father withheld. It was that he never once walked into the house and asked. I'm 76 years old. I've made more mistakes than I have years, and I'm still practicing this. Some mornings I catch myself starting that sentence again, "I'll feel settled when," and I have to walk myself back into the house like a man leading a stubborn animal. But I know the truth now, and I'll say it to you as plainly as I know how. You will not find peace at the end of the road you're on, because peace was never located at the end of anything. It's not a wage. It's not a bonus. It's not what God hands you after you've served long enough to deserve it. It was in the house the whole time. And the door was never locked. You were just out in the field, and the music was playing, and you couldn't hear it over the sound of your own work. Now I want you to do something for me, and I want it specific, because vague never healed anybody, and it won't heal you either. In the comments below, finish your sentence. The real one. I'll finally feel chosen when, and write what actually goes in that blank. Not the spiritual sounding answer. The true one. The thing you'd be embarrassed to admit you're still waiting for. And then write the year you started saying it. That second part matters more than the first. Because when you see the number when you write down 2009, or 1997, or the year your father died, or the year that door closed, you're going to feel something in your chest that no sermon can give you. You're going to see how long you've been out in that field, and you're going to understand that the party has been going the entire time. Then read the other comments. Read what people wrote, because you are going to find your own sentence in somebody else's handwriting, and something about that will loosen the grip it has on you. This channel is created without ads and without platform income. If these messages have touched your heart, strengthened your faith, or helped you during a difficult moment, and you'd like to support this work, you can use the QR code on your screen or the contribution link in the pinned comment. Thank you for walking this path with us. I still have my father's keys. They're in a drawer in my kitchen, and they don't open anything anymore. That building was sold years ago, and I hear it's a warehouse now. But I kept them for a reason. Every so often I take them out and hold them, and I think about a man who went down into a concrete room every morning for 31 years, and wrote the date on a wall, and talked to God about a family he'd never be thanked for praying over. He wasn't in the field. He never was. He'd found the house early, and he stayed in it, and I mistook his peace for defeat for 40 years. You are standing closer to that door than you think. You always were.